Good evening. I'm glad you've joined me tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable position, let your shoulders soften, and allow your breath to slow. The day is behind you now. All that matters is this quiet moment. Tonight I'll be here with you, guiding your mind gently into rest. My name is Jonathan Holly, and together we'll drift into a world of mystery, calm, and sleep. You don't need to think or solve or do anything at all. Just let my voice carry you deeper into stillness. Now, let's begin our mystery story for tonight. London, 1887. The city was wrapped in a grief of its own, the kind that lingered between fog and chimneys, thick as unspoken prayer. Inspector Alistair Finch stood upon Blackfriars Bridge, the morning's gray breath rolling off the river beneath him. In the carriage lantern's dull glow, something gleamed upon the stones, a sculpture, delicate, glacial, and horrifying. Within it, the figure of a woman. She lay as though asleep, her lips parted in a soundless plea, her body encased entirely in a glass so fine it caught the mist and held it captive. The gaslight scattered off her skin, as if her flesh itself had been transmuted into crystal. The crowd behind the constables murmured prayers. One woman crossed herself and whispered, "The glass widow has taken another." Finch had seen death many times before, but never art. There was an obscene beauty to it, the fragility of the thing, the way light trembled over its surface. When he crouched near, his reflection merged with hers, and for an instant it seemed they shared a single trapped breath. He drew back sharply. The coroner muttered that no incision could be made. The body was fused to its casing. Not poured, not sculpted, Finch said quietly. This was grown. The words chilled him even as he spoke them. There was no sign of heat damage, no chemical residue. Only the faint scent of lilacs clinging to the air, an impossible perfume in November. Something caught Finch's eye. Beneath the glass on the woman's bare wrist, etched faintly into the translucent shell, was a single word, sorrow. It shimmered faintly when the fog thickened, as if light responded to grief. When the body was lifted, the glass cracked faintly, a sound like a sigh, and from within something small and black fell to the stones. A mourning brooch, its cameo carved into the likeness of a woman's face, half shattered. The constable moved to discard it, but Finch stopped him. The face upon the brooch was familiar, too familiar. He remembered the portrait that had hung once in the drawing-rooms of Mayfair, when she had still received guests. Lady Isolde Marin, widow of the alchemist and inventor Charles Marin, whose mysterious death in a laboratory fire 2 years prior had filled every scandal sheet. The fog deepened, swallowing the bridge, the whispers, the corpse. Finch's gloved hand trembled slightly around the brooch. The reflection of the woman in glass still lingered in his mind, her open eyes seeming to look beyond him, into something waiting. When at last the corpse wagon creaked away and the river swallowed the light, Finch turned toward the city's shadowed heart. Somewhere beyond the fog, a kill flickered to life, and in its light something wept. The next death arrived with the chill rain of December. A messenger found Finch at his rooms in Bloomsbury, where he had fallen asleep at his desk, the dead woman's brooch clutched in his hand like a relic. The boy's voice trembled as he spoke. "Another, sir." "In Bracken Row, they say it's the same made of glass." Finch followed him through alleys slick with soot and rain until they reached a shuttered, townhouse that leaned like an old drunk against its neighbors. The front door bore no number, only a faint etching of a circle, as though a ring of fire had once licked the wood. Inside, the air was stale with books and candle smoke. The constable stood back as Finch entered. The victim sat in a high-backed chair before the hearth, or rather, within it. His form was suspended inside a crystalline shell that caught the firelight and threw it in splintered rainbows across the walls. He was a scholar by the look of him, wire spectacles frozen mid-fall upon his nose, ink staining his fingers, pen still clutched tight. On the desk beside him lay an unfinished manuscript. On the symmetry of the soul, Finch examined the room. Every surface bore mirrors, small, warped, silvered things, reflecting fragments of the glass corpse from 100 angles. He moved carefully, as though each reflection might strike back. Beneath one mirror he found a note, written in a cramped and hurried hand. Truth demands reflection. He did not know why the words unsettled him so deeply. Perhaps because they echoed what he had found at Blackfriars. Sorrow rendered tangible, reflection turned deadly. He ordered the windows sealed, though no one could explain how the glass casing had formed. The coroner, pale and sweating, whispered that the body's very tissue had fused with silica. No force known to man, he stammered, could have done this without destroying the flesh. When the body was lifted, the glass cracked softly, the same sign fracture as before. Inside the hollow that remained, Finch glimpsed a shimmer of black dust that smelled faintly of lilac and smoke. He pocketed a trace in an envelope. His rational mind urged restraint, yet he could not help but think of Lady Isolde Marin, the widow whose art once turned grief to beauty. She had been called the enchantress of glass, and when her husband died, she had vanished from society, taking her secrets with her. That night, Finch sat before the window of his room, watching the fog curl against the glass like something alive. The brooch lay beside the envelope of black dust. The two objects seemed to hum faintly when near each other, a vibration too low for sound but felt deep in his teeth. He turned away, but the reflection in the pane refused to follow. For in the shifting glow of his lamp, another face looked back at him, a woman's face, fine and pale, eyes silver as molten glass. When he turned, there was no one there. The days that followed were measured in fragments of sleep, of memory, of glass. Finch's lodgings, once a place of order, had become a shrine to the inexplicable. The brooch rested beside the shard he had, pried loose from the first corpse's casing, both wrapped in silk yet never still. When the lamplight struck them, faint prismatic threads danced upon the ceiling like spectral handwriting. He began to dream of mirrors that did not return his face, of hands reaching from behind transparent walls. Each morning he woke with frost on his breath, though the fire burned all night. At the Metropolitan Police Laboratory he sought reason. He brought the shard and the dust, demanding analysis. The chemist, a pragmatic man, spent 2 days attempting to determine their composition. When Finch returned, he found the man pale, trembling, his voice barely coherent. "It is glass," the chemist whispered, "but not as we know it. Its lattice shifts under observation. It remembers being flesh." Finch dismissed him gently, but the words lingered like a bruise. That night, beneath the flickering gaslight of his study, he pored over every note on Lady Isolde Marin he could find. The widow of Charles Marin, inventor, alchemist, rumored occultist. Together they had pursued what he termed emotional resonance experiments, seeking to transmute sensation into physical form. The last record of her exhibition at the Royal Academy described sculptures that shimmered with uncanny warmth, as though infused with life itself. Critics had called it blasphemous beauty. One clipping, yellowed and torn, mentioned her final piece, The Architecture of Grief. None who saw it ever spoke of it plainly. The sculpture had been destroyed in the fire that claimed her husband's laboratory. Finch leaned back, exhausted. On his desk lay the scholar's note, Truth Demands Reflection. He turned it over and found, written faintly on the reverse, a symbol, 2 interlocking circles, crossed by a vertical line, a sigil that seemed to throb when he stared at it too long. He had seen that mark before. It adorned the front gate of the Marin estate, burned into the iron. At dawn he left his rooms and took the northern road toward Hampstead Heath. The fog thinned as the city receded, revealing skeletal trees and crows that watched like sentinels. The Marin mansion appeared as a silhouette against a pallid sky, its windows like blind eyes. Before he reached the gate, he paused. Something glittered in the frost upon the path, a sliver of clear glass, no larger than a petal. When he picked it up, his own reflection appeared within it, but distorted, older, hollow-eyed, his mouth open in a silent scream. He dropped it, but it did not fall. The fragment hung for a heartbeat in the air, then crumbled to powder that shimmered away on the wind. Finch crossed the threshold of the Marin grounds, unaware that the gate closed behind him of its own accord. The Marin estate crouched upon the heath like a mausoleum, its stones weathered to the color of ash. A mist hung about the gardens, heavy with the scent of iron and lilac, that same impossible perfume. Finch passed through a courtyard littered with the remains of shattered sculptures. Each fragment held a whisper of a human feature, a hand poised mid-reach, a cheekbone, a closed eyelid. He shivered as he realized they were not carved, but formed. The great oak doors opened before he could knock. A woman stood within, pale and composed, her black gown absorbing the light. Her eyes, a silver gray without warmth, studied him as though from a distance of years. "I do not receive callers," she said. "I am Inspector Finch," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I come regarding the deaths in the city." A pause. "Yes," she murmured, "they have begun again." She led him through corridors filled with glasswork that seemed to breathe, or perhaps it was merely the light shifting behind it. Chandeliers swayed, though no wind stirred. Finch caught his reflection in every surface, multiplied and fractured, until he scarcely knew which face was his own. They entered a conservatory, where a great furnace glowed, faintly violet behind wrought iron grating. Lady Isolde poured tea into translucent cups, the liquid refracting into strange colors. "My late husband sought to prove that grief could be quantified," she said softly, "that the human soul, when pressed to breaking, releases an energy that may be caught, as heat is caught in glass." Finch's stomach tightened. "You speak of alchemy." She smiled without mirth. "Of loss?" He noticed her hands were scarred, faint white lines like cracks healed over. "You believe these deaths are connected to your husband's work," he said. "I believe," she said, turning the cup slowly in her fingers, "that some griefs refuse to die. They find new vessels." Her gaze drifted to the window, where frost crept in fine veins across the glass, forming shapes that might have been faces. What you see in the city, they are echoes. Those who sought to touch truth without understanding the cost. And what of you, my lady? She looked at him then, fully, piercingly. I am its remainder. The furnace behind them pulsed once, casting the room in shifting hues. Finch rose, uneasy. For an instant he saw himself in the mirrored door, but his reflection stood closer than it should, breathing when he did not. Lady Isolde's voice floated from behind him. Inspector, glass remembers touch. Every mark it ever received. Be careful what you place within it. When he turned back, she was gone. Only her untouched teacup remained, the liquid inside cooling, the color fading to pale gray like smoke frozen in time. Finch left the estate as twilight deepened over the heath. Behind him, the mansion's windows glimmered faintly, each pane showing a figure that stood watching until the fog swallowed them whole. Finch returned to London, but sleep eluded him. Each night, in the dim glow of his study, he saw faces pressed behind the glass of his memories, the widow, the scholar, the child who had never known grief enough to escape it. He wrapped himself in shawls and coats, walked the gas-lit streets, and tried to forget the shimmer of the frost upon the sculptures. Yet the knowledge persisted. Grief could be caught, trapped, and made permanent. 3 days later, news arrived of another death, a child this time, daughter of a silversmith in Clerkenwell. She had been found encased in glass mid-laughter, her tiny hands stretched toward something unseen. The glass shimmered faintly in candlelight, catching the walls in fractured rainbows. Finch's stomach twisted with both horror and compulsion. He had to see her. He returned to Lady Isolde's estate, determined, though every instinct warned him of the danger. A fog over Hampstead Heath had thickened, pressing against the windows like living matter. The house seemed to breathe in the mist, groaning faintly with its own weight. She met him at the door without surprise. "You came," she said softly. "They are ready for you now." In the workshop, the air was heavy with the scent of molten glass and burnt lilac. A massive furnace roared, its flame violet and unnatural, casting flickering shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. Finch saw it then. A machine half-shrouded in copper and mirrors, wires twisting toward crystal orbs. Tubes led from a basin where water pulsed with an almost human rhythm. He felt the hairs on his arms stand. Each glass sculpture in the room seemed to hum with life. Finch picked one up, a small hand, delicate and transparent, and it trembled beneath his fingers. Lady Isolde's eyes followed him, steady, unflinching. "Each piece requires heat," she said, almost conversationally, "and grief. The kill is alive to sorrow. It listens, it remembers." Finch leaned closer to the machine. It throbbed beneath his hand, a soft vibration like a heartbeat, and from somewhere behind the walls came faint weeping. He spun around, but the room was empty. Only the shadows of glass creatures wavered in the firelight. A note lay on a table beside the kill, written in a child's hand. "We cannot leave the heat. We are too full of it now." He shivered, realizing the sound he heard might not have been weeping at all, but a chorus of the trapped echoes of grief fused into crystal. Lady Isolde's voice floated from the doorway, cold and precise. "The kill preserves what the world discards. Those who die unobserved. They endure here, and one day you will understand." Finch stepped back, heart pounding. In that moment, he realized the truth he had feared. The glass did not merely contain bodies. It contained souls. And somewhere, in the violet firelight, he thought he saw the faintest movement, a tiny figure pressing its face against the glass, staring at him, smiling, waiting. The city had grown cold and gray, and Finch had begun to feel the weight of something unseen pressing upon him. Every reflection, a polished doorknob, a darkened pane, a puddle upon the cobblestones, seemed to shiver, as though aware of his presence. Letters began to arrive at his lodgings, unsigned, written in a delicate hand he did not recognize. "Do you still see her in the glass?" one asked. Another, "The kill remembers more than the fire. Do you know what it whispers?" He spent hours poring over them by candlelight, feeling a slow erosion of certainty. The words were strange, almost playful, yet heavy with menace. Each bore a fragment of a mirror sealed within its envelope, a shard no larger than his thumbnail, its edges catching the candle's flame. He found he could not touch them for long without a sense of vertigo, as though each fragment contained a small piece of someone's soul. Finch decided to write back, careful, formal, seeking reason, but the ink refused to settle. The letters seemed to twist beneath his pen, the words reshaping themselves. Phrases he did not write appeared as the night deepened. He grew restless, wandering his study, staring at the shard from Blackfriars, the brooch from Bracken Row, the powder from the last kill. Each trembled when near the others, a subtle vibration in the silence. At last one envelope arrived without paper, only a sliver of glass, polished and curved like a tiny lens. Through it, he saw the reflection of his own room, but warped. In the corner, a faint figure pressed its face against the pane, silver eyes gleaming. Finch gasped and dropped the shard. It skittered across the floor, but did not shatter. Then came the words, etched in condensation upon his window, as though breathed by a ghost. "She waits where the fire never dies." Finch's thoughts turned immediately to the Marin estate. He had walked the halls of that house with Lady Isolde, seen the furnace, glimpsed the humming machine, whose copper veins seemed alive. He had felt the presence of the lost within the glass, their grief captured, suffocating yet somehow preserved. The thought of returning chilled him, but he knew he must. That night he dreamt of the child from Clerkenwell, mid-laughter, reaching for someone unseen. Her tiny hands trembled against the glass, which pulsed faintly as if alive. From behind him, the furnace's violet light illuminated the walls, with twisted reflections of his own face, hollow-eyed, exhausted, yet incapable of turning away. When he awoke, he found a mirror propped against his door that had not been there before. In it his reflection moved independently, pressing a finger to the glass as though to beckon him. For the first time Finch understood. The glass was not merely a vessel. It was an interlocutor. It remembered, it responded, it demanded. And somewhere beyond the city a furnace flickered, as if acknowledging that he had taken the first step toward the truth. The fog clung to Hampstead Heath like damp wool as Finch approached the Marin estate once more. He felt the weight of the letters in his coat pocket and the cold pulse of the glass shards against his palm. Every step along the frost-lined path seemed to echo with quiet, plaintive voices. The mansion loomed ahead, darkened windows reflecting the murky sky, yet behind them, a faint flicker of violet light suggested the kill still burned. Lady Isolde greeted him without surprise. Her silver-gray eyes held no warmth, only the measured patience of one accustomed to visitors who did not yet understand what they sought. "You have returned," she said. "I wondered if you would." Inside, the house had transformed. What Finch had once called a workshop now resembled a gallery, the walls lined with shelves and pedestals of glass figures. Each figure bore traces of humanity, a hand curled, a face frozen mid-expression, a torso twisted in perpetual sigh. Some were as large as a man, others the size of a bird or child. Each shimmered with an inner light that was not quite reflection but something more alive, something that seemed to pulse faintly to the rhythm of an unseen heartbeat. As Finch moved among them, he heard whispers, not from the room, but from the glass itself. The figures seemed to lean toward him, waiting. He froze before one of the sculptures, a woman encased mid-step, her expression wrapped in terror and sorrow. When he leaned closer, he noticed a faint inscription at the base, "To remember is to endure." Lady Isolde's voice floated behind him. "They are not merely forms," she said softly. "Each contains the grief it once embodied. The kill listens, the furnace records. Grief is no longer ephemeral. It persists." Finch turned toward her. "You mean they are still aware?" She inclined her head. "Yes, awareness, memory, even desire. But do not mistake it for malice. They do not act. They merely are. Yet sometimes they call." A shiver ran through Finch as he realized that the hum he had felt in the shards, the subtle vibration of the letters, the whispers in his dreams, it all originated here within this gallery. And then he saw it, a small child, mid-laughter, encased in a sculpture, her tiny eyes pressing against the glass as if pleading for release. He stepped closer, heart pounding. When the light refracted off the sculpture, he thought he saw movement behind her eyes, a flash of intelligence or perhaps hope. He reached out instinctively, and the glass pulsed under his fingertips, as though recognizing his touch. Lady Isolde's gaze followed him. "Do you see now, Inspector? Each grief, each sorrow endures longer than life itself. Some will never leave." Finch drew back, suddenly aware of the silence of the house, the oppressive weight of the kill's unseen fire, and the whispers that seemed to rise from every piece of glass around him. And in that quiet, almost imperceptible moment, the streets of London had become a blur of fog and shadow for Finch. Each alley seemed narrower, the gas lamps hung lower, and every reflection in the puddles or shop windows twisted, teasing him with glimpses of figures he knew should not exist. Sleep brought no comfort. He dreamed constantly of glass and fire, of the faces trapped mid-expression, of eyes that followed him with unnatural awareness. He awoke each night to shards scattered on his desk, letters pressed under glass fragments, whispering words that were almost, but not entirely, human. Finch returned to the Marin estate, driven not by duty, but by the sense that answers lay buried in the glass itself. The gates creaked open as if expecting him. Inside, the gallery had grown. Pedestals now supported sculpted fragments of human memory. A man bent over a book, a woman clutching a candle, a child mid-leap. Each bore the mark of some invisible hand, perfect yet impossibly fragile. Finch's eyes caught the faintest glimmer in the corner of the room, a mirror leaning against the wall, its surface shattered but intact. He approached and saw not his reflection, but a scene from years before. A fire, a scream, the fleeting glimpse of Lady Isolde holding her husband as the flames consumed the laboratory. He recoiled, but the shards of glass in his hands hummed, a low vibration that seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. A letter fluttered to the floor, addressed to him in the same delicate hand as before. It read only, "He waits in fragments. Do you see him yet?" The Kuhl's fire roared faintly in the distance. Finch's mind raced. If grief could be captured, preserved, shaped, what remained of those who had entered the glass willingly? What remained of the widow herself? And the letters, were they a plea, a warning, or an invitation? He felt as though the room leaned toward him, pressing the weight of centuries of sorrow into his chest. He turned toward the furnace and glimpsed a shadow move across the wall, human-shaped, yet unnaturally fluid. Lady Isolde's voice echoed softly from the gallery doorway. "Memory is never still. Each shard, each fragment, contains what we cannot bear to forget. Some of it reaches out. Some of it waits." Finch knelt before a small sculpture, a child encased mid-step, her expression one of frozen delight. The glass pulsed faintly beneath his fingertips, and in that instant he thought he heard a laugh, not imagined, but real, echoing from within the crystal. His hand trembled as he realized the kill, the glass, the grief itself. They were alive, aware, and perhaps even anticipating him. He drew back, breath shallow, heart pounding. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the gallery, a small figure stirred, pressing its silver eyes against the glass. And Finch, staring at the trembling reflection, understood with a quiet horror that there was no longer a boundary between observer and observed. The glass was watching him. The Marin estate breathed in darkness as Finch returned, each footstep muffled by the thick carpet of dust and frost. The wind whispered through broken panes, carrying the faintest echo of weeping. The gallery had grown more oppressive since his last visit, filled with sculptures whose forms were now impossible to distinguish from life itself. A man hunched over a desk, a woman kneeling mid-prayer, all with eyes frozen wide in silent supplication. Finch's pulse quickened. Each figure seemed attuned to him, following his movement with subtle, unsettling imperceptibility. Lady Isolde awaited him near the furnace, her expression calm as always, her gaze cool and implacable. "You wish to understand," she said softly. "Then you must see the heart of it." She guided him to the kill. The furnace glowed violet, almost organic in its warmth. Surrounding it, wires and mirrors intertwined with crystal orbs, forming a lattice that seemed to pulse with its own life. Finch's hand instinctively reached toward one of the mirrors. It shivered beneath his touch, reflecting not his face but a series of faces he did not recognize. "The kill records," she murmured. "Every grief, every echo of sorrow, every heartbeat of loss. They remain, trapped until the glass remembers." Finch's gaze fell upon a small sculpture perched near the furnace's edge, a child encased mid-laughter, her delicate hands reaching toward some unseen presence. A thin line of vapor rose from the crystal, curling upward like smoke, and then he heard it, a whisper faint but unmistakable. "Help us." The voice trembled from inside the glass. He recoiled, heart racing as the whispers multiplied, forming a chorus of sorrow and longing. Lady Isolde's eyes followed his reaction, serene and untroubled. "Do not mistake preservation for cruelty," she said. "They are beyond harm now, but their grief persists. The kill is patient. It waits for understanding. Finch's hands trembled. The shards he had collected in London vibrated faintly in his coat pocket, as though resonating with the kill's heartbeat. He realized that each sculpture, each fragment, each reflection was interconnected, part of a vast, unbroken lattice of sorrow and memory. He felt the weight of countless griefs pressing against him, shaping the air, bending it, as though he had stepped into some living, breathing repository of loss. Then he saw movement. Among the reflections in the mirrors and the glass, a face pressed close his own, but older, hollow-eyed, lips parted in silent terror. It mimicked him, breathing when he did not, gesturing when he remained still. Panic clawed at his chest. He stumbled backward only to feel the kill's warmth like a hand on his spine. The whispers rose, soft at first, then insistent, echoing from every pane and prism. You will stay with us forever. And in that moment, Finch understood. The glass was not merely a vessel of grief. It was a sentinel, a predator, a witness. The frost clung to London like a shroud, and Finch's lodgings had grown unbearable. Mirrors and polished surfaces betrayed him at every turn, reflecting not his own weary visage but fragments of glass figures that should not exist outside the Marin estate. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, haunted by the violet glow of the kill and the chorus of trapped voices that whispered endlessly. Each shard he had collected, the brooch, the glass dust, the fragments from Blackfriars, pulsed faintly in the darkness, attuned to a presence he could not name. Finch wandered the streets, wrapped in a coat damp with fog and dread. In the glass of a shop window, he glimpsed a child pressing her face to the crystal, eyes luminous and pleading. He recoiled. She vanished, leaving only his reflection, older, hollow-eyed, whispering something he could not understand. Letters continued to arrive, unsigned, their paper infused with fragments of mirror. One contained a single word scrawled in spidery ink, "Observe." Another held a tiny shard that refracted the street light into impossible patterns, forming faces he recognized but could not name, and always the sense that someone or something was watching him. He returned to Hampstead Heath, the path to the Marin estate slick with ice. The house waited, dark and expectant. The gallery now sprawled, a labyrinth of glass figures frozen mid-motion, each casting light and shadow that seemed alive. Finch noticed that among the sculptures, some bore a subtle pulse, a faint shiver beneath their crystal skin, as though the grief contained within them was aware of his presence. Lady Isolde emerged from the shadows, her figure pale against the violet glow of the kill. "You seek to understand," she said. "Yet understanding is a perilous thing. Grief, once crystallized, cannot return to its natural form. It persists, and some echoes will reach for you." He felt the tremor of shards in his coat, the brooch from Blackfriars, the glass dust from Bracken Row, the tiny fragment from the letters, all resonated with the kill. Finch approached a mirror at the edge of the gallery. Its surface was frosted, yet behind the frost he saw movement, his own reflection altered, pressing against the glass as if seeking release. The shards in his pocket hummed violently. The glass figures stirred subtly, the tiny child's eyes glinting, a frozen smile tugging at her lips. He recoiled, heart-hammering. A thought struck him. Perhaps the kill and the glass were not merely preserving grief but testing him. Each reflection, each pulse of vibration, each whisper from the trapped, they were invitations, warnings, challenges, and he realized with a cold certainty that he had become part of the lattice, observed and measured as much as any sculpture. When he glanced back at the violet furnace, he saw that its light was shifting. It no longer reflected fire alone, but the faint outlines of human forms writhing within the glow. Finch awoke to a house drowned in frost, yet the air smelled faintly of lilacs, that impossible fragrance he had first encountered at Blackfriars Bridge, lingering now in his lodgings as if some unseen hand had carried it there. He coughed lightly, the scent clinging to his throat, sweet and heavy, unnerving in its familiarity. The shards on his desk trembled subtly, catching the lamplight in fractured rainbows. He felt their pull, a silent beckoning, and he knew he could not resist. The letters had multiplied in recent days, each containing fragments of mirror and glass, each imbued with the same faint perfume. Some bore words, others only scratches, spirals, sigils, or what seemed to be fingerprints pressed into the surface. "We remember. Do you?" One read. Finch pressed the paper to his forehead, tasting faint ash upon his lips. He understood then that glass did not merely preserve bodies. It preserved sensation. Every sorrow, every warmth, every fleeting joy, trapped, recorded, and ready to be invoked. He returned to Hampstead Heath as the twilight deepened, snow crunching beneath his boots. The Marin estate loomed like a mausoleum of memory, each window dark but glowing faintly at the edges. Inside, the gallery had grown unervingly, branching into hallways that did not appear to exist before. Finch noticed for the first time the subtle scent of smoke, or perhaps burning lilac, emanating from the kill-room, drifting along the hallways with a presence almost sentient. Lady Isolde met him, calm as ever. "Do you smell it?" she asked. Lilac, smoke, grief made tangible. Each scent is a memory, and each memory a prism. You breathe it, and it bends you. Finch walked among the glass figures, his eyes scanning their frozen forms. One child laughed silently, pressed close to a crystalline wall, and Finch thought he saw tears suspended mid-fall upon her face. A scholar from Bracken Row crouched behind a lectern, his pen still poised, and the first victim, the glass widow herself, shimmered faintly, as though aware that he was here. A small shard fell from a pedestal, spinning lazily in the violet light of the furnace. Finch bent to retrieve it, and in its facets he saw himself, pale, hollow-eyed, trembling slightly, yet unable to look away. The shard pulsed in his palm, and the lilac fragrance intensified, suffocatingly sweet. Whispers rose faintly from the walls, insistent, playful, mournful. "Do you remember her? Do you remember them? Do you feel the kill's heart?" Finch staggered, the shard falling from his fingers. He realized with a slow, terrifying clarity that the kill, the glass, and Lady Isolde were not merely preserving sorrow. They were cultivating it, amplifying it, bending those who came near into echoes of the grief it held. And he, inquisitor though he was, had now become part of their design. Lady Isolde's gaze met his. "The scent of lilac," she murmured, "is never." Finch awoke to a house drowned in frost, yet the air smelled faintly of lilacs, that impossible fragrance he had first encountered at Blackfriars Bridge, lingering now in his lodgings as if some unseen hand had carried it there. He coughed lightly, the scent clinging to his throat, sweet and heavy, unnerving in its familiarity. The shards on his desk trembled subtly, catching the lamplight in fractured rainbows. He felt their pull, a silent beckoning, and he knew he could not resist. The letters had multiplied in recent days, each containing fragments of mirror and glass, each imbued with the same faint perfume. Some bore words, others only scratches, spirals, sigils, or what seemed to be fingerprints pressed into the surface. "We remember. Do you?" one read. Finch pressed the paper to his forehead, tasting faint ash upon his lips. He understood then. The glass did not merely preserve bodies. It preserved sensation. Every sorrow, every warmth, every fleeting joy trapped, recorded, and ready to be invoked. He returned to Hampstead Heath as the twilight deepened, snow crunching beneath his boots. The Marin estate loomed like a mausoleum of memory, each window dark but glowing faintly at the edges. Inside, the gallery had grown unervingly, branching into hallways that did not appear to exist before. Finch noticed for the first time the subtle scent of smoke, or perhaps burning lilac, emanating from the kill room, drifting along the hallways with a presence almost sentient. Lady Isolde met him, calm as ever. "Do you smell it?" she asked. Lilac, smoke, grief made tangible. Each scent is a memory, and each memory a prism. You breathe it, and it bends you. Finch walked among the glass figures, his eyes scanning their frozen forms. One child laughed silently, pressed close to a crystalline wall, and Finch thought he saw tears suspended mid-fall upon her face. A scholar from Bracken Row crouched behind a lectern, his pen still poised. And the first victim, the glass widow herself, shimmered faintly, as though aware that he was here. A small shard fell from a pedestal, spinning lazily in the violet light of the furnace. Finch bent to retrieve it, and in its facets he saw himself, pale, hollow-eyed, trembling slightly, yet unable to look away. The shard pulsed in his palm, and the lilac fragrance intensified, suffocatingly sweet. Whispers rose faintly from the walls, insistent, playful, mournful. "Do you remember her? Do you remember them? Do you feel the kill's heart?" Finch staggered, the shard falling from his fingers. He realized with a slow, terrifying clarity that the kill, the glass, and Lady Isolde were not merely preserving sorrow. They were cultivating it, amplifying it, bending those who came near into echoes of the grief it held. And he, inquisitor though he was, had now become part of their design. Lady Isolde's gaze met his. "The scent of lilac," she murmured, "is never innocent." The frost had thickened into a brittle layer over Hampstead Heath, but within the Marin estate, warmth from the kill distorted reality. Finch moved cautiously through the gallery, the glass figures now forming a labyrinth. Light fractured endlessly off their surfaces, scattering his vision and his mind alike. Every step echoed with subtle whispers. The chorus of grief pressed into crystal walls that seemed to breathe with memory. Lady Isolde followed silently, her presence calm yet insistent. "You feel it," she said, her voice low, almost a hum. "The veins of glass, they carry more than shape. They carry everything we leave behind: desire, sorrow, loss. Each shard is a pulse, a resonance of the soul it encases." Finch stopped before a figure he did not recognize, a woman seated mid-bow, her hands clasped as though in supplication. Tiny fissures ran across her form, glowing faintly like molten silver. When he leaned closer, the fissures expanded, revealing shapes beneath the surface. Memories pressed into the glass like water into ice. He glimpsed laughter, tears, whispered confessions, moments of intimate sorrow, and glimpses of faces he thought long forgotten, friends, lovers, even his own lost sister. The shards in his coat stirred violently, vibrating against one another, as if recognizing their reflection in the figure. Finch realized with a pang that every fragment he had collected in London was now part of a larger lattice, a web of grief and memory extending through the very house. He tried to step back, but the floor seemed to pulse beneath him, subtle vibrations carrying through the soles of his boots. Lady Isolde's gaze followed him with an unerring patience. "The kill is alive," she said softly. "It is not merely fire and crystal. It is witness, keeper, and sometimes arbiter. Grief is energy, and energy is never lost. It travels, it gathers, it waits for those who observe too closely." Finch shuddered. The whispers intensified, a low susurration from every sculpture, from the walls, from the shards in his pockets. He bent to pick up a tiny fragment that had fallen from the latest figure. Through its facets he saw the reflection of the gallery behind him, yet within it faces pressed close. The scholars, the child, the widow herself. They watched him silently, yet with a clarity that chilled him. One face, closer than the others, bore his own features, twisted by fear and exhaustion. It smiled faintly, and in that smile, Finch saw a reflection of himself that had already begun to change, hollowed by sorrow, reshaped by observation. The gallery seemed to pulse beneath Finch's feet, an imperceptible rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. Each sculpture around him shimmered subtly, veins of light running through their translucent forms like rivers of sorrow. The whispers from the glass were louder now, more insistent, a chorus of voices overlapping, laughter frozen mid-gasp, sighs caught in eternity, and faint cries he could not place. The shards in his coat quivered, vibrating in resonance with the kill's energy. Lady Isolde moved beside him, silent, her eyes trained on a tall figure of a scholar. "They echo," she said softly, "not only what was lost, but what was observed. Every visitor leaves a mark. Every witness adds their grief to the lattice. You see the echoes because you are now part of them." Finch swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Part of them? I am not. I am here to investigate." Her gaze met his, calm, unyielding. "And yet, every step you take among these figures embeds your own sorrow into their lattice. Look closely." He obeyed, moving toward a sculpture that had caught his attention earlier. A small child, mid-laugh frozen in glass. Fissures ran along her arms and legs, faint veins of violet light within them. Through the cracks, Finch glimpsed fleeting images. His childhood home, his sister's small hand clasping his, faces of colleagues long dead, the whisper of regrets he had tried to bury. The glass did not merely contain the child. It reflected him. A shard slipped from the pedestal, spinning lazily in the furnace's violet light. Finch caught it, and the reflections within it multiplied, his face fractured into dozens of versions, each echoing his fear, each whispering his own thoughts in voices both familiar and alien. The hum of the kill intensified, a steady vibration that seemed to resonate through bone and blood alike. Lady Isolde watched him quietly. "The kill preserves grief," she murmured, "but it does more than preserve. It amplifies, refracts, and sometimes returns. You cannot leave unchanged." The whispers grew coherent, forming words from the fragments of sorrow. "We wait. We remember. We see you." Finch's chest tightened. The gallery's light bent unnaturally. Every reflection fractured, overlapping, turning walls into infinite depths of crystal. For a moment, he thought he saw the first victim, the widow, herself standing among the sculptures, her silver eyes fixed on him. He stumbled back, breathless, and the shards in his coat rattled violently, as though urging him forward. Something within the furnace pulsed in harmony with the whispers, sending waves of violet heat through the room. Finch understood, with a sudden and terrible clarity, that the kill and its lattice of grief were alive, patient, and aware of his every motion, and that awareness was now reaching for him. The gallery had grown labyrinthine, twisting unnaturally with every visit Finch made. Ceilings seemed higher, corridors longer, and shadows deepened in corners where no light should reach. Each sculpture emitted a faint vibration, a hum of memory and sorrow, echoing through the walls. Finch felt it through his boots, his fingers, even his teeth. The glass resonated with life. He carried the shards in his coat pocket, their faint pulse now inseparable from his own heartbeat. Lady Isolde led him through a narrow corridor he had never noticed before. The air smelled strongly of lilac and smoke, a scent he had begun to associate with unease. At the end of the corridor stood a pedestal, bathed in the violet glow of the kill's light. Upon it rested a crystal formation, unlike any he had seen, an altar of polished glass, its facets reflecting not only the gallery, but the observer himself. "This is the heart of the kill," Lady Isolde said softly, her hands brushing lightly over the surface. "It is a mirror for grief, an echo chamber for sorrow. Those encased within the glass have left fragments of themselves here. And now so shall you." Finch approached cautiously. Within the altar he saw fleeting images, the first victim, the scholar, the child, all moving subtly, shadows of memory alive within crystal. And beneath them, faint impressions of his own past emerged, his sister's small hand, moments of pride and shame, laughter long forgotten. The glass did not merely reflect. It called, tugging at the corners of memory and heart alike. A shard from his coat trembled violently in his palm. He felt a low vibration, almost a heartbeat, synchronizing with his own. The whispers began again, forming words he could comprehend. "Come closer. Remember, join us." Finch recoiled, but a part of him was drawn forward, compelled by the irresistible pull of the kill's design. Lady Isolde's voice, calm and unwavering, floated behind him. "The altar will answer, Inspector, but only if you are ready. Do not fear what you will see. Fear only what you will become if you turn away." He peered into the glass, seeing countless reflections of himself and the others. The layers of memory, sorrow, and observation folded upon each other, forming a lattice that seemed to breathe. And then, in the very heart of the crystal, he glimpsed a faint movement, a pale, hollow-eyed figure resembling himself, reaching outward from within the glass, silently beckoning. Finch stumbled back. The shards in his pocket rattled, and the kill pulsed brighter, as if alive with awareness. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. "We wait. We remember. We see you." He understood with a bone-deep chill that the altar did not merely reflect grief. It absorbed it, multiplied it, and claimed the observer who lingered too long. And now, in the center of the gallery, Finch realized with horror that he had lingered far too long. The glass waited. And so did she. The kill's violet glow filled the gallery, suffusing the room with an unnatural warmth that prickled the skin and made the shadows bend. Finch approached cautiously, aware that the glass figures around him were no longer inert. Their surfaces pulsed faintly, and the veins of light within them seemed to thrum in rhythm with the whispers he could feel vibrating in his chest. Every step toward the furnace felt heavier, as though the air itself was resisting him. Lady Isolde followed silently, her eyes fixed on the altar at the kill's center. "Few come this close," she murmured. "Most cannot endure what the kill shows, but you linger because the glass remembers you, because you cannot turn away." Finch reached the edge of the violet flame. Heat licked his cheeks, yet the glow was not merely fire. It was alive, writhing like molten crystal, shifting in impossible ways. Within its depths he saw the faces of the trapped, the widow, the scholar, the child, and countless others, suspended mid-expression, their grief rendered eternal. Their eyes pressed outward, staring through the furnace into him. He swallowed, hand trembling, and noticed the shards in his coat vibrating violently. The hum had grown into a resonance that seemed to penetrate bone and marrow. He felt pulled forward, toward the heart of the kill, toward the altar of reflection. The voices, whispers, cries, laughter, SIGHS coalesced into a single, insistent command. "Come, join." Finch's rational mind screamed for retreat, but something deeper, more fragile, drew him onward. The kill's heat intensified, and within the violet flame the trapped souls moved, gesturing, reaching, pressing close. He saw himself there as well, hollow-eyed, pale, a reflection of what he might become if he gave in. Lady Isolde spoke softly, almost kindly. "The kill does not consume the soul," she said. "It preserves it, but the preservation requires acknowledgment. You must see the grief, recognize it, and participate. Only then will it release its truths." Finch's hand brushed against the altar. The glass pulsed, veins of light extending outward, intertwining with his own shadow. A vision struck him, his sister lost to time, laughing at him from within the crystal lattice. The sensation of grief, guilt, and longing surged through him, overwhelming, intoxicating. The whispers became a chorus, lifting, pressing, guiding him. For a moment Finch saw the full lattice, the kill, the shards, the gallery, every sculpture, every fragment of sorrow interwoven into a single living organism. And at its center a single pulse of violet flame reached outward, toward him, patient, insistent, beckoning him into the heart of its consciousness. He froze, realizing that crossing that threshold would bind him irrevocably to the glass, a participant in its memory, a guardian of its grief, a reflection among reflections. And yet the pull was irresistible. The violet glow of the kill had become a presence, pressing into Finch's mind with every heartbeat. The gallery had transformed entirely. Hallways stretched impossibly, pedestals twisted into impossible angles, and the glass figures moved subtly, veins of light crawling along their surfaces like living blood. The whispers had grown insistent, coherent, pressing in syllables that Finch could barely comprehend. See, join, endure, remain. He clutched the shards in his coat, feeling them pulse violently. Each shard reflected fragments of the gallery, but not merely the gallery of glass. He saw versions of himself, pale, hollow-eyed, trapped mid-step, pressing against invisible walls, mouths open in silent pleas. He staggered, almost falling, and for the first time wondered if the glass did not merely preserve grief, but shape the observer into grief itself. Lady Isolde appeared beside him, calm, almost serene. "Do you understand now, Inspector?" she asked. "The kill and the glass are not tools of vengeance. They are mirrors of truth. Every observer leaves a mark. Every sorrow is absorbed, and those who linger become part of the lattice." Finch's gaze shifted to the altar at the kill's center. Its facets pulsed with violent intensity, veins of violet flame spreading outward, intertwining with the shards in his hands. He saw with bone-deep horror that the reflections in the altar were not merely copies. They were alive, sentient, moving independently, pressing toward him. One in particular mirrored him perfectly, his own face, hollowed by fear and exhaustion, eyes wide in silent terror, lips trembling in a scream he could hear without sound. A sudden shiver ran through the gallery. The sculptures quivered, fissures extending like spider veins across their surfaces. Finch realized with a chill that the lattice was reacting. The kill had acknowledged him, accepted him as participant, and was beginning to shape him into what it contained. The shards in his coat rattled violently, vibrating in resonance with the altar's pulse. Lady Isolde's voice floated close to his ear. "To witness grief is to carry it. To linger in the presence of the kill is to become it. Look, and you will see yourself as you truly are." Finch staggered toward a mirror along the corridor. His reflection did not match his movements perfectly. The eyes staring back were older, hollowed, trembling. The mouth moved before he did, whispering words he did not intend. Remain. Join. Endure. He stumbled backward, and the shards flew from his coat, spinning through the violet glow. One shard embedded itself in the floor, catching the kill's light. Within its facets, he saw the lattice of glass, the altar, the sculptures, and himself, pressed against crystal walls, screaming silently. For the first time he understood with sick clarity that there would be no escape. The kill did not merely preserve grief, it claimed it. The violet light of the kill consumed the gallery, and Finch moved through it like a man drowning in slow motion. Every glass figure around him trembled, their veins of light pulsing, whispering, observing. The lattice had grown, stretching beyond walls and corridors, folding reflections into infinite depths. Each step he took seemed to echo endlessly, yet always toward the altar, toward the heart of the kill, where grief and memory merged into a living thing. Lady Isolde appeared suddenly, not behind him, but beside him, her presence as fluid as shadow. She extended a hand, pale and unyielding, yet not threatening. "You see it now," she said softly. "The kill does not take indiscriminately. It embraces those who understand the cost of truth, those who bear witness." Finch's chest tightened. He tried to step back, but the floor beneath him quivered, responding to his hesitation. The shards in his coat vibrated violently, and the altar's facets pulsed brighter, sending veins of violet light snaking across the gallery. Within the glass, he glimpsed the first victim, the scholar, the child, all pressing their faces close, silent and pleading. and behind them mirrored, reflected, hollow-eyed versions of himself. "Why?" he asked, voice trembling. "Why preserve grief like this? Why trap them?" Lady Isolde's eyes were calm, unflinching. "Because grief is eternal," she said. "It cannot be destroyed, and when captured, it becomes clarity. Every sorrow, every loss, every unspoken regret, they endure here. They speak, they watch, and they teach." Finch's gaze drifted to the altar. He saw within it his own reflection, fractured and multiplied, pressed against crystal walls, mouth open in silent terror. The shards in his hands pulsed, as though responding to his fear, the whispering chorus rising. Join, remain, endure. He realized with a terrible understanding that the kill's embrace was patient, gentle in its inevitability. Resistance only delayed the inevitable. Grief, sorrow, observation, they were all drawn into the lattice, and now he was being drawn too. The violet flame licked the edges of the altar, veins spreading, reaching outward, and Finch felt it brush against his soul. Somewhere deep inside, he recognized the truth. The glass did not merely preserve memory. It claimed those who observed too long. He was no longer merely a witness. He was part of the lattice. Lady Isolde's voice was a whisper against the roar of the kill. "Do not fear it. You are among those who see truly. The kill's embrace is inevitable." The shards in his coat shattered softly, sprinkling the gallery with prismatic fragments. Finch felt himself drawn forward, drawn into the altar, into the lattice, into the violet flame. His last thought, fleeting, shivering, was of the child, mid-laughter, reaching for him through impossibly thin glass. And then the kill swallowed him. The kill's violet fire pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and inexorable, and Finch found himself suspended within it. He was no longer on solid ground. The gallery, the altar, the shards, and even Lady Isolde herself seemed to fold around him, bending into impossible geometries of glass and reflection. Every sculpture, every fragment, every face he had seen pressed outward, converging on him in waves of light and sorrow. His own image flickered in the facets of crystal veins that now intertwined with his limbs, stretching him into the lattice of grief itself. He heard the whispers, no longer faint but insistent, a chorus of sorrow and longing. "Welcome. You see, you remain." He tried to speak, but his voice dissolved, absorbed into the vibrations of the glass that now carried not only memory, but consciousness. Lady Isolde appeared, serene and unmoving, her figure refracted into infinite reflections. "Do you understand now?" she asked. "The kill does not merely preserve grief. It binds it, shapes it, and magnifies it. All who witness are drawn into it. All who linger are remembered. You are part of the lattice now." Finch's mind reeled. Each shard he had carried, each fragment he had touched, each reflection he had observed, all had been threads, weaving him into this crystalline web. He could see the first victim, the child, the scholar, all moving subtly, aware, waiting. And in the deepest facets of the lattice, his own hollow-eyed face pressed outward, silent, mirrored by infinite versions of himself, each trapped mid-motion, mid-thought, mid-fear. He felt himself stretching, dissolving, merging with the lattice, and yet somehow observing simultaneously. Memory, grief, and reflection flowed into him, intertwining until he could no longer distinguish self from echo, past from present, living from preserved. The whispers became a single voice. All that is grief, all that is memory, all that remains, we are one. And in the heart of the violet flame, he glimpsed Lady Isolde herself, or perhaps merely her reflection, gazing at him with the faintest trace of sorrow. This is the cost of truth, the kill seemed to say. To see fully is to belong fully. Finch's last thread of awareness registered the echo of his own thoughts, swallowed by the lattice, pressed into crystal like a handprint in ice. And for a fleeting moment, he felt the presence of all who had come before him. Their grief, their longing, their awareness joined in an eternal, silent embrace. The kill pulsed once more, steady and deliberate, and all was quiet, save for the soft hum of glass veins, the patient heartbeat of memory preserved. The gallery was silent. The violet glow of the kill had faded to a faint pulse, a heartbeat that echoed through the lattice of glass and memory. The shards and sculptures were still, yet the air hummed with the lingering resonance of countless griefs, each folded into crystal veins that spanned the estate like invisible roots. Finch was gone, or rather he existed now only as a whisper, a reflection, a pulse within the lattice, inseparable from the kill's eternal memory. Lady Isolde stood at the center of the gallery, her figure pale and calm, hands folded over one another. Around her, the glass figures remained poised mid-expression, their faces serene, twisted, or frozen in silent terror. The child's laughter, the scholar's frown, the widow's despair, all pressed faintly against the surfaces, echoes of sorrow preserved in crystal. She moved slowly among them, observing, touching the delicate surfaces with hands scarred and knowing. In the stillness, she whispered softly, "The kill preserves what the world forgets. The glass remembers what hearts discard, and those who come seeking truth are folded into it whether they wish it or not." A shard of glass from the shattered altar lay at her feet. In its facets the faintest shimmer of Finch's hollow-eyed reflection lingered, gazing outward with awareness and horror. His presence had been absorbed into the lattice, a final addition to the chorus of grief. He would watch, remember, and endure not as a living man, but as part of the kill's eternal consciousness, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to escape. The lilac scent lingered in the air, heavy and sweet, and the soft hum of the kill resonated like a heartbeat through the gallery. Lady Isolde gazed upon her collection, the child, the scholar, the widow herself, and now Finch among them, and for the first time her silver-gray eyes betrayed a trace of sorrow. She whispered almost to herself, "Grief endures, memory endures, and sometimes the witness must endure as well." The wind outside rattled the broken panes, sending shards of frost across the floor. The violet pulse of the kill slowed, steady and unyielding, bathing the gallery in a soft, spectral glow. Within the crystal lattice, Finch's reflection lingered, patient and aware, a permanent observer in a world made of grief. And somewhere, beyond the violet flame, the glass widow watched, waiting for the next witness to come, drawn by curiosity, compulsion, and the subtle, irresistible pull of sorrow preserved in fragile, unyielding crystal. The gallery was silent. The kill's heartbeat continued, and the lattice of sorrow endured forever. The story concludes with Finch irrevocably absorbed into Lady Isolde's crystalline world, a haunting testament to grief. obsession, and the cost of truth.